An excruciatingly detailed breakdown of how NASA plans to destroy the ISS. After its retirement in the year 2030, the nearly 1 million pound space station will become by far the largest object ever brought back from space. And here's how NASA plans to do it safely, from what they think. Now, this is an illustration of the ISS during controlled reentry. 1 million pounds. The International Space Station is counting its days, with their retirement looming over the Orbital lab in just a few years' time. For more than 20 years, the space station has served as home for astronauts in low Earth orbit, but it will soon meet its demise as it plunges through the atmosphere to leave behind tiny fragments of an iconic legacy. NASA is cooking up a plan to deorbit its beloved space station in the year 2030, sending it flying through the Earth's atmosphere, where most of it will burn up from the heat of reentry. The space agency, along with international partners, has looked over several different options and narrowed it down based on feasibility and cost. After a years-long effort, NASA decided to call on the private industry to design a spacecraft that will drag the space station towards its fiery death. The ISS is a big boy, holding a record of the largest human-made structure in space. It stretches 357 feet long, 109 meters. It's about as large as a football field and will be the largest object to ever be deorbited. Bringing down the ISS will not be easy, as you can imagine, and making sure its remaining parts land far away from inhabited areas is the key challenge. Here's a breakdown of how NASA and its partners plan to bring the storied space station down to its final resting place. Why is NASA ditching the ISS? NASA and partners began assembling the space station in 1998. The ISS has served as pivotal platforms for scientific research and new tech demonstrations in microgravity and have often been used on Earth. The space station symbolizes international cooperation and peace, showcasing collaboration among space agencies for the US, Russia, Europe, Japan, and Canada. It has hosted hundreds of astronauts from 18 different countries who have completed over 270 spacewalks. But all good things come to an end, and the ISS is getting old, and the wear and tear of being in space has taken its toll. Significantly, its retirement will make way for commercial utilization of low Earth orbit, with private companies designing their own space stations to take over the ISS once the ISS is gone. Russia has agreed to continue deploying its cosmonauts to the ISS until 2028 as it constructs its own space station in orbit. Since its inception, the ISS has continuously hosted at least one NASA astronaut and one Roscosmos cosmonaut. Over the years, Russian Soyuz and Progress vehicles have conducted numerous crew and cargo missions to the ISS. The Russian Space Agency will likely take these toys with them when it leaves, meaning NASA will be without its key ISS partner for the decommissioning task. The space station will have to be destroyed, as disassembling it is simply not practical. The station was never designed to be taken apart again. Macro Longbroek, astrodynamics lecturer at Delft Technical University in the Netherlands, told Gizmodo. He says, "I think the current plan is the only option available." Can you imagine a 1 million pound thing coming barreling towards our Earth? The space station's initial assembly took 27 missions using NASA's now retired space shuttle. Taking it apart is bit by bit would require extensive amounts of effort by NASA, international space agencies, and their astronauts, in addition to having a spacecraft large enough to return those parts to Earth. Any disassembly effort to safely disconnect and return individual components, such as modules, would face significant logistic and financial challenges, requiring at least an equivalent number of spacewalks by space station crew, extensive planning by ground support personnel, and a spacecraft with the capability similar to the Space Shuttle's large cargo bay, which does not currently exist, NASA wrote in a recent report. The space agency added that it's in the process of developing a preservation plan for some smaller items from the ISS, and this makes a lot of sense. The station is filled with mementos and artifacts worth preserving. The path to destruction? Rather than letting the space station tumble its way towards Earth in an uncontrolled re-entry, NASA and partners will have to target a remote uninhabited area in the ocean as a landing point for any remaining debris. The orbital debris mitigation standard practice accepts a human casualty risk of less than 1 in 10,000. Before the process of deorbiting takes place, the ISS will be emptied out of all movable goods that can be transported back to Earth. The ISS astronauts will also have to evacuate the space station before its deorbit, of course, leaving the orbital lab empty for the first time in decades. Someone, we obviously don't know who, will be the last astronaut to float within its cozy confines. A controlled re-entry always begins with lowering a spacecraft's orbit. The first step to re-entry will be cancel the periodic orbit raising burns that maintain the lab's position some 250 miles above sea level. Eventually, the station's orbit will decay to below 150 miles, according to Landbrook. This natural orbital decay caused by atmospheric drag will likely take months to gradually bring the ISS down, he said. And the SpaceX factor. For the next step, the space agency tasks SpaceX with designing a new deorbit vehicle. The vehicle will dock with the ISS and perform a series of deorbit burns to further lower the space station's orbit. NASA has previously suggested using Russia's Progress cargo spacecraft to deorbit the ISS, but that's now off the table. In March, the space agency released its 2024 budget proposal, which included $180 million for developing a deorbit capability for the ISS by the end of 2030. At the time, NASA had estimated the ISS Tug would cost around $1 billion in total. The recently awarded SpaceX contract is worth $843 million, which will cover the development of the vehicle, but does not include the cost of launching it. The company has not shared details of its Space Tug design, and it's not clear whether it could repurpose its Dragon spacecraft or build a different one altogether. The exorbitantly priced Tug is a one-time use spacecraft and will not survive the deorbit assignment. While SpaceX will develop the deorbit spacecraft, NASA will take ownership after development and operate it throughout its mission. And NASA wrote, along with the space station, it's expected to destructively break up as part of the re-entry process. Safe and controlled re-entry. With the help of its brand new Tug, the ISS will need to execute a large re-entry burn to precisely target its re-entry location. This will ensure a controlled descent through the atmosphere to manage its debris footprint. The thrust maneuver has to be strong enough to bring the spacecraft into an elliptical orbit or an oval-shaped path so that it's properly captured by the atmosphere, according to Tobias Lips, managing director of satellite aerodynamics company Hyperschall Technologies Göttingen in Germany. The re-entry expert estimates that around 40% of the ISS will survive its heated journey through the atmosphere, but that NASA will have sufficient control over the splashdown zone. While a significant amount of material could fall from space, it likely won't land near inhabited areas. Destruction of an icon. The ISS will slam into the atmosphere at speeds of 17,500 miles an hour. That's as fast as an asteroid. Once the space station descends to an altitude of below 60 miles, it will start to fall apart, according to Landbrook. During its fatal nosedive, the famous structure will start to distort. Its familiar outline will begin disintegrating piece by piece, with the metal bending under the pressure. parts of the ISS that survive reentry are likely constructed constitute 10 to 20% of the total mass. That's over 180,000 pounds worth of material, which is why a controlled reentry is key. This might seem obvious, but the smaller the spacecraft, the fewer fragments survive reentry. As Lips explained, smaller objects heat up more intensely and are more likely to disintegrate upon reentry due to their compact size, whereas large objects are less prone to complete breakdown, making it hard for them to fully disintegrate. The remaining ISS fragments will splash down in an empty area of the southern Pacific Ocean known as the spacecraft cemetery, with plenty of dead satellites buried at the bottom, including Russia's Mir space station, which crashed to Earth in 2001. The remote region of the Pacific Ocean, called Point Nemo, lies between New Zealand and South America, and it is the farthest place from dry land. This is on Gizmodo. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. This is by Passant Rabi. Thank you. Support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.